现在呢，我要请各位所有的观众朋友相当有耐心的，我们来听一下诺贝尔经济奖得主 Stiglitz。2001年，他获得了诺贝尔经济学奖。Stiglitz 呢，在这个礼拜发表了非常重要的他对未来，尤其是美国经济的几个主要的看法。他当然有几个重点。第一个重点呢，他认为美国过去呢主要的重点是在挽救大银行，但是美国的中小企业是创造就业主要的一些企业，这些企业的贷款是一些小型的银行，所以他认为下一阶段奥巴马要专注的是对于中小企业跟中小银行的扶植。另外一个很大的部分呢是绝对不可以紧缩政策，他觉得奥巴马要有政治决心推出新一轮的刺激方案。另外，国家虽然的债务不应该再增加，但是减轻债务的方法并不是紧缩政策，而是不应该去再花费在一些不该打的战争，像伊拉克战争方面，美国的钱应该拿回来做一些筹资，政府也在这里扮演角色。他说，当年网络的崛起就是美国的政府预算所扮演的一个支撑的一个重要的角色。他觉得美国跟欧洲未来会陷入日本式的零成长，就是消失10年的模式，除非美国政府痛下决心扶植新的创新产业。
Well, I think the fundamental problem is that there's a deficiency in aggregate demand. Part of what had propped up the global economy before the crisis was, you might call, profligate American consumption. Savings rate was zero, and so did the banks. The news that came out just today, for instance, in the United States, showed that while the government had poured money into the big banks, it did very little for the smaller banks, which are at the center of lending to small and medium-sized enterprises. So the new news is that 10% of American banks are on the watch list. The American approach is far better. We've tried the tough approach repeatedly. It's what Herbert Hoover did back in the Great Depression, made the Great Depression. It's what the IMF did in East Asia and converted those downturns into recessions and depressions. So we've had ample experiments in which you might say the austerity approach has been tried, and in almost every case it's failed. The problem in the United States is that we didn't have a big enough stimulus. It did reduce significantly unemployment from what it would have been, but the stimulus was too small and it was not well designed. And the problem here in the United States is that political will to do another round of stimulus is not there, and that means the likelihood that unemployment will remain stubbornly high is very great. Studies that have been done repeatedly show that returns on government investments, public investments in technology, infrastructure, education pay far higher returns than this, especially in the United States where we're being starved. And the same thing is true in some of the European countries. I think the focus ought to be on the direction of spending. Obviously, if you're spending money on wars that don't really enhance your security, you're wasting money. Your debt is going, the debt is going up. If you redirected that money from those unproductive spending to more productive spending, the balance sheet can actually be improved. You know, no business ever looks at, in looking at any business, you never look just at the liability side. You always look at the asset side. And a firm that doesn't invest is doomed to die. And the same thing is true about our society if we don't make the essential investments. So the issue is how should we be spending money, not how much we should be spending. I think it's more likely that the United States and Europe may sink into what might be called a Japanese-style malaise. Growth might be a little higher than in Japan because in Japan, population labor force growth was zero. We have, in the United States, a population labor force growth of around 1%. Growth in the last quarter was a little over that 1.6%. But this growth is so slow that it won't be able to get the unemployment rate down. So that is where I think we're more likely to go. Slow growth, not enough to get us back into a really healthy situation. The data that's coming suggests that true cost will be a little higher than that. You know, the number that the politicians focus on is the actual expenditures that goes on the books. And what we did in our study is looked at the costs that go beyond that. For instance, almost 50% of those who fought in Iraq are coming back disabled. We're going to be paying for health care and disability payments for the rest of their lives. And the total amount of that is by itself around $500 billion or more. At the time we wrote our book, we made some conservative estimates. The numbers coming back with these disabilities are significantly higher than we estimated, and the cost for each is higher than we estimated. So the numbers that have come in look like that $3 trillion was a conservative number.